We cannot expect history to make exceptions in our case. Everybody who came from a lower to a higher position in the world at any time had to subject themselves to a form of collective discipline and unity. And they could not be scattered all over the place and achieve that container that is essential to all people, nationhood. And when you achieve nationhood, you must make an inventory of everything that goes into the making of a nation and have someone qualified to do all those things. One of the holdbacks is that we look for the glamour, too much glamour. Oppression depresses the ego, the sense of self-satisfaction. Now we have to go back, all the way back to self-satisfaction. And from self-satisfaction, there has to be group satisfaction. So while it is absolutely essential that you love yourself, because any love you have for other people is of no great value if you do not love yourself. And I'm not talking about ego washing just for the sake of ego washing. Every human being was put on this earth for a purpose and given a purpose by the Creator. And the first thing we need to ask ourselves, have we fulfilled our purpose? What is our mission? And every people on this earth must have a mission. And the main mission, as Malcolm X and others have told you repeatedly, and Garvey has told you, regain the land.
That's right.
Without land, there is no nation. Now, I am a little less enthusiastic about Nelson Mandela because he has not asked for the return of the land. When he came to power, the whites controlled 87% of all the land in his country. They still control 87% of the land. Until he called for the return of the land, I will share with you and trade with you as much land in Africa as you will trade with me in Europe. If I have no European land, then you have no African land. And when Africa is fully cultivated, when what in its land, the great agriculture, mineral wealth, gold, manganese, cobalt, when these things are cultivated, there should be no poor African and no hungry African. Now these things are being cultivated for other people. What I'm speaking to is the very concept of nation seems to have eluded us It will elude us so long as we ask foreigners to come to our country and do what we need to do. So therefore, when we take over a nation, we must have made an inventory of what goes of a nation. So many people have to be making shoes. So many people have to be making safety pins, hold your child's diaper together. We work railroad. And so many have to be designing the railroad and the railroad car. All the Japanese did is to take one automobile and break it down and began to innovate, making different parts of it. And they put together, and they had an automobile. So there's no mystery about things we're from, and we are doing for other people the same kind of thing normal would be doing for ourselves. Now, if we wanted to start a great garment industry, inasmuch as most black women have worked in the garment district one way or the other, one time on buttons, on clothes, on all kinds of clothes. They worked in the district for other people. Why can't they work for us? Why can't they work on our tutelage and we find the salary to pay them? We all wear clothes. Now, there's no argument about the fact that we need clothes. And when we take over a nation, you need people who know metals. You need people who educate. You take that inventory, make sure you have those people either in training or functioning, and let each one train one. What we need to look at is the model for a nation. You have to have people who can do everything that's necessary to contain a nation. We have to stop sickness between us, because our oppressors not think anymore or the other. If we came together, in as much as we are strategically located people in the world, meaning there are more of us in different places in the world than other people. I did not say that we are numerically larger than other people. Oh, something's happening. But we are strategically located, for if we brought all of this together in a great Pan-African union based on the land, based on the possibilities of our agriculture and our mineral wealth properly marketed by us, but properly mined by us and refined by us on our own terms, we can be a self-sustaining people. And we don't have to take over other people in order to do it. We are the only people fortunate enough, endowed with land and talent. If we took it all back and used it for ourselves, we would have more than enough for ourselves and enough to sell to other people. And if we're willing to deal with other people on that kind of basis, there's no use of us sacrificing our young people in stupid wars that don't have to be fought in the first place. But we can come together in honorable trade. Let's take one entity. Let's take the Caribbean islands. If it came together in honorable trade, they can be self-sustaining in food. In the area that used to grow food, you got supermarkets, condos, and golf courses. None of these things are doing the Caribbean people enough good to be worth sustaining. In Bermuda, they had a red onion. They had a monopoly on the onion. A Texan came, put some in his suitcase, and started an onion industry in Texas. Now the same Texans, sell Bermuda onions, red onions, to the people of Bermuda. Now they got to go to a Texan now to buy their own red onion. And the land they used to grow their red onion is now either a golf course, or condo, or a big supermarket area. When people take away from you the right to, not only the right, but the ability and the right to sustain yourself, they take away from you what is vital to the concept of nationhood. Vital to the concept of nationhood, you have to feed yourself. You have to educate yourself. You have to defend yourself. But if you've got gold and iron ore to the extent of the need of the West, and they cannot get it from you by war, then they'll make some honorable terms to get it. And those honorable terms between you, they've got something you need, you've got something they need. And this exchange creates a zone of peace, because you cannot fight each other and keep that zone all at the same time. We have to understand the structure of nations when the Asians first, then the Europeans, came into Africa. Now, in my African course 1, I teach these beginnings. Now I will probably go further, because now there's information on the Sudan and its connection with Egypt that didn't exist. What made Egypt a state? Bringing together a much-needed labor supply, developing the goods, the services, that they would be able to feed all these people. And because they could sustain them, food and housing, and could bring them together for religious fervor, all of this coming together, the lower and the upper Nile, made a state. They had to organize in some kind of protective fashion to become a state and to relate to the states in the South that was the basis of their origin. And they came together, Upper and Lower Nile, and formed a country that the Greeks would call Egypt. And in their writings, in their folklore, in their myth, they created so much of the literature that will go into the literature of the world's 3 major religions, and that will go into the making of what the European calls civilization. What you forget in looking at Europe, and this is why people get away with so much, we don't look at the chronology of Europe. And when you look at the chronology of Europe, they began to emerge around 850 BC. What was happening in Africa, 850 BC? Egypt has spread itself so thin, it was now threatening. On the eve of the 25th dynasty. Now, look at the dynasties of Egypt. After the 25th, there was nothing left worth being called a dynasty. That was the last walk in the sun when the brothers from the south moved up north and showed Egypt how to control a nation one more time. That last walk in the sun ended thousands of years of civilized living. And why could Egypt sustain such a large population over such a large area? It had a suitable food supply. It had a suitable housing supply. It had a spiritual life that did not offend the people or put one against the other. It already had every element that would go into the making of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Different people with different approaches to the religion made different things out of it. And some made God ungodly. That is true of Eastern religions also, because in the Hindu faith, they speak of the sacred cow, but not the sacred human being. So they are off too. Then people got into a habit of making comparative studies of their respective chosen gods, which was the worst thing they could have done, given the circumstances. If you look up the word God in a good etymological dictionary, God itself means different things, but none of the information about any of the gods gives them the right and the privilege of cursing anybody, because gods do not curse. And people must get this through their skull. Gods do not curse. Gods do not favor. The very word God eliminates that. Now, with the coming of foreigners to Africa from Western Asia, people not too certain about who they are in the history of the world, then or now, they began because they could not handle an African way of life. They were not equal to that kind of communalism. They became grabbers, created the embryo of what would later be capitalism. Now, you think capitalism will resolve if you got enough money. But if you got the money you wanted, you would have to cheat somebody, because that in itself creates an imbalance. So there is nothing wrong with capitalism properly used. It has to be used for the people and not against the people. And I do not believe it is impossible for capitalism to be democratic and to be honest and still survive. Just you have people who want super profits. and they began to destroy the sovereignty of other people and other nations. And when they take away your sovereignty, your responsibility, your very being, essence of your political life, then they take away so much that goes with your spiritual and physical life. We have not talked enough about culture and the role of culture in sustaining a people. You have to first recognize you have culture separate and distinct from that of your oppressor, and that so much of that culture comes out of your trying to live in an atmosphere not exactly created in your favor. You are adjusting to somebody else's culture and somebody else's habits. A people, by virtue of living, creates a cultural style. It creates even a killing style. This is why I didn't believe the thing about O.J. Not that black men don't kill, they do. They don't kill that way. See, physical mutilization in that way is part of the killing style of another people, mostly Mediterranean whites. Sometimes we are passion killers. If an African man says, I'm going to kill you, if you avoid him 24 hours, you can end the whole thing. He changed his mind. So if you're going to kill, he had to kill you right away, or leave you alone. See, when people study styles, approaches of other people, so many blacks have gone to their grave for things they did not commit could have been saved, because that approach is not our approach. We don't stay around and play over the dead body. You're dead, you're dead. We're gone. And so when people study that, a whole lot of things, sometimes we'll charge you of. They will discover that's not exactly the way we do it. We're passion killers. Gonna kill you right away. Gonna let you go right away. And we just don't hold grudges as long as some other people lose sense of the possibilities. I'm still talking about nationhood. What do you have to do to sustain a nation? What are the responsibilities? People must be fed. Things must be distributed as close to equal as possible. People must be educated. And so when you gain control of a nation, all these things must be in your hands. And if they are in the hands of your former colonial master, you are not sovereign. You are not free. Now, Jamaica, if it had it together, had its political house in order, its cultural house in order, it could sustain all the islands in the Caribbean Sea. There's nothing wrong with Jamaica being the sustaining island. It's the largest. It has the largest number of technically trained people for the kind of age in which we live. So we have to start reconsidering things and develop frameworks that will leave different people sovereign but dependent as others will be dependent on them, and an exchange of what one has got. Now, Jamaica can make enough potatoes for all the islands, if it would. And yet some of the islands are sent to the United States paying 3 times more for potatoes. We have to come together as a people, supporting ourselves, educating ourselves, and estimate how many shoes we need, and if we could just sell half of the shoes, we can estimate the profit. And it could be tremendous. What I'm trying to say is that we shouted nation time too soon. We shouted nation time before we understood what goes into the making of a nation, before we made an inventory of the needs of a nation to make sure we have on hand the technicians, the supply lines, the educational system that could sustain a whole nation. Until you get that in focus, you are sovereign. You're not sovereign. No matter how many limousines your president rides in, or how high the flag, it's nothing going to make you a nation except self-reliance. And when we look at Du Bois, Booker Washington, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, all these men were saying basically the same thing using different words. And it was not a problem. It was not a problem of one or the other. We needed all of them in the time slot that the Creator put them on the earth. For each message carries on from the other message. One is reinforcing the message of the other. Now, if we knew this, the Congo situation would be such a situation. We knew when it came to power superficially, we knew that was one of the richest spots in Africa. So what are we going to do with our people who can take that rich spot and transfer it into a great and powerful sovereign nation without taking the rights of any of the people in the nation? I am excited about what's happening in Zaire, now renamed the Congo. But I think too many people after Lumumba, after Mobutu, have about the same ambitions as Mobutu. And I hope those people won't just create another dictatorial power. In this country, which is so rich, and maybe the richest single country in all Africa, in gold, manganese, and copper, but rich in agriculture to the point they can rent the Germans a piece of land more than equivalent to the state of Delaware just for a rifle range. In the first place, I don't know why anybody should let another nation have a rifle range of that size in its own country. That is part of the usurpation of the sovereign rights of the people of the Congo. Some parts of the Congo are so rich agriculturally, they have to put halters on the cows to keep them from eating themselves to death. In my last trip to that country, I got with a Congolese intellect. We went to a place called Kiev. Here the grass is so green and luscious, you have to stop the cows from eating, or they eat themselves to death. We got some of that same grass, went back to the hotel, cleaned it, and ate it as a salad. It was a decent salad. We were eating as good as the cows. What I'm trying to point out, if this country is that rich agriculturally, there is no excuse why anybody in that country should be hungry. And yet there are people there hungry. One of the biggest thieves in the Congo was one of check1's personal friends. I won't call him a boyfriend, but he was a personal friend. He let Mobutu steal a lot so he can steal even more. And he's still walking around without a scratch. In what is now Zimbabwe, that used to be southern Rhodesia, Ian Smith controlled his personal land in that country is larger than the state of Delaware. Here's a man that killed thousands of Africans. And when the rebels left the field and let the politicians make peace, he's now a part of the parliament. His office is close to that of the president of the country. He should have been killed the first day. Now the African is not only hospitable to strangers and invaders, he's merciful, and sometimes more merciful to them than to his own. Many of the Africans are not willing to forgive the atrocity that had demeaned their continent for well over 200 years. They're not willing to forgive. When did white people forgive? Did they forgive the Nazis? Hold on. They went to Nuremberg and put them on trial. And the key ones got hung if they didn't commit suicide ahead of time. I think we need to look at the word forgiveness, look at the word state, and understand what we mean by it. We're letting people go who murdered our children and to walk away scot-free with a confession. How much are we supposed to forgive? There are some things I do not forgive. There are some things I cannot forgive. And when I saw my mother for the last time in a Jim Crow wooden stinking hospital in the South, and she asked for a glass of water, and the white nurse wouldn't let me give her a glass of water. And I don't know whether a glass of water would have prolong her life another hour or another day. But she was entitled to some water. When I tried to pour it for her, the white nurse let me know that I was not an employee there, and she's the one who decided who gets water. And I don't hated hospitals. I hated sometimes the personnel in hospitals. I get a feeling in my stomach every time I go near one. I did not forgive, and I never will forgive. There are some things I think it's best to try to forgive and forget. But what they're asking of us is what has never been asked of another people. When Europeans catch a European bandit on their land and kill him or drive him away, we have caught some bandits in our land. And sometimes, in fact most of the time, especially in South Africa, we should do the same thing. When Nelson Mandela came to power, whites controlled 87% of the land. They still control 87% of the land. Now, the agreement that he's contemplating making with Buthelezi, the most important thing, it will give different people in South Africa back their traditional land if he can get away with this kind of treaty. But with sentiment serving such an important part in Africa, I think Africa will sentimentalize it to the point where they're going to say, let them keep the land on these terms. And if you get it, if they can get it in one term, then they'll take it on another term. It's just if you catch somebody on your land, they have to leave or stay only on your terms. And what's being asked of us and the commission in South Africa, partly headed by Bishop Tutu, is to forgive and forget. And people now can come before us and confess, find the machine guns that Africans at Soweto, that other atrocity. Women, children, dead, gone. And I can't, and I must forgive. It's a little too much. I am at heart a Pan-Africanist, and I want to conclude my remarks on the score of Pan-Africanism. We need not separate ourselves based on who's from those speck of dust in the Caribbean Sea, who's from Africa, who's from Georgia. Late at night, when you're trying to get a cab at Kennedy, nobody cares where you are from. If your face is black, you're going to have a difficult time getting that cab. And I've been in this situation, and I thought of Johnny Johnson, a black multimillionaire. His chances would be no better than mine, maybe less. He's taller, equally black, and the cab driver might be a little afraid of him. The cab driver might take a chance with me. So I hang there. I'm passed up about 7 or 8 cabs and pass me by. Then a brother comes along. He knows that from Kennedy into town is about $25, really. Brother, I'll take you, $50. So the brother comes and takes advantage of the situation, cheats you, takes you home. So he's become a crook among crooks, but a different crook. He knows when he looks at you, ain't too much you can do to him, you know. Size things up, you know. So he'll take you. And you don't always get a brother to come by and take you. Man, you wait and let some independent car hustling up a little money will take you into town. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about nation. If you are part of a total nation, if you are a citizen of a total nation, then this don't supposed to happen to you, because your citizenship is supposed to be on the level with other citizenships. And why is it now, right now, you can go into an African bank, and if you're not first in line, whites will be waited on in preference to you, because the mind has been controlled, oriented in such an extent it still follows colonial instructions 30 years after the physical presence has been gone. But we have to think in the framework of nation. What is a nation? What goes into the making of a nation? And we must have on hand every item, spiritually, culturally, and politically. And we have to lose our sentiment about so many of others who are not of us, who are not delivering, but who are prancing, playing games with time and situation. Things began to move more and more towards some form of correlation. People sometimes misunderstand the nature of commitment. In the case now of Betty Shabazz, everybody said, I will pray, I will do this. A good physician trained in how to handle a burning case can do more for her than 1,000 people on their knees. I'm not against people being on their knees, but I'm saying that while you're on your knees, somebody else will have to be doing something else, more concrete, where the proof, the results, is more apparent. It's not one or the other, but each in its own place, doing the job it needs to do. And too many times people train for jobs, don't get the jobs they are trained for among us, and we send away to get someone else to do that same job. We have to work well with each other, and I call Tommy to a Tom. Sometimes you're going to have to Tom a little bit to a Tom in order to get things done. I don't think we know each other quite as well as we should. And many of us think, because of separate geography and colonial masters that differ, there is a great deal of difference between the different approaches to different ones of us based on background. Our enemy don't think no more of someone from an island, or someone from Georgia, or someone from Carolina. You don't think no more. And so we have to stop all this nonsense, dividing ourselves based on sororities, fraternities, and social organizations, or what little speck of dust in the Caribbean Sea that gave us birth, inasmuch as we had no control over any of it. And when the people are out of power so long, they long desperately for power. And when they get close to it, they panic. And they spend so much time literally giving it back to the person who had it in the first place. We have to, if we are going to follow prescription, which I've laid down, Pan-Africanism or perish, if we cannot develop a concept of an African world union and participate one to the other, we might as well go out of business as a people, because nobody is going to respect anyone who are not the masters of themselves, feeding themselves, educating themselves, and protecting themselves. There is no European solution for your problem.
I know that's right.
Even if you join them in capitalism, you are a servant of capitalism. You don't have to join them in socialism. Well, you had that before they had shoes. You had that all along. All you have to do is to develop a socialist system that will take into consideration our total culture, our religious commitments, our spirituality. And we have to understand, before the rise of Europe and the occupation of Africa by Europeans, all of the killing, there was no killing, genocidal killing of Africans against Africans. Prior to this period, the one war in Africa that caused the largest amount of casualties was the Zulu Wars, lasting from the late 1700s to the middle of the 20th century. But wars to keep the European out of Africa. I'm saying that we have to accept some responsibility for stabilizing the Caribbean islands, the whole continent of Africa. Have to have some kind of method of dealing with the Arabs and Islam, because no one came to Africa to do African people any good, and that includes the Arabs. Now, there's a good library of information on the subject, but if people don't want to read it or consider it, that's not exactly my fault. But nobody came to Africa to do Africa any good. Among the other things I'm working on is the role of the missionaries in conquest, showing you that the Hebrew missionary was mainly commercial and still is. Christianity is mainly commercial and still is. Did you hear how many priests in the Congo? Over 10,000 priests in the Congo. Why is it that you can get guns to kill each other when you can't get farm equipment to feed each other? Why are you so easy to get guns? You don't manufacture no guns. Why can you get them so easy? And why are you so difficult in getting farm equipment and basic things? You teach kids basic technology. What I'm saying in conclusion, that our children should be trained from birth for some form of leadership. find out what he can best do and make sure that he has a chance to do that particular thing and make a contribution to the total of the people through that particular thing that he gets done best. I'm afraid we're going to have to come together among African people. Some we may not like, and some may not like us. But if we're going to survive, all of us are going to have to come together into a great Pan-African union. I think a union of committed Africans will save all Africa. And because we have no desire to conquer the rest of the world, which wouldn't make sense anyhow, we'll make a contribution to the stabilization, not only of Africa, but the whole world. And we did it once, and of course, we can do it again. And I thank you.
And we thank you, Dr. John Henrik Clarke. And we thank you. Let's give Dr. Clarke a warm round of applause. Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Let's give him a warm round of applause. Dr. Clarke, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. John Henrik Clarke.